Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the event Tube as Trashure. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you to all the panelists for being here today. This is the third event as part of the stream Will You Be My Trashure? And trashure is just a strange kind of novel word that we invented to create a hybrid between trash and treasure, but something that doesn't really settle on either meaning, but hangs between those two meanings. Specifically today we talk about pornography, and I'm very glad that we can have a panel on pornography. And we started, many of the people involved in this panel, we've been all working on this topic for quite a number of years, specifically also how digital networks and the internet have changed pornography. And then today we're going to be even a little bit more specific by looking at the porno tube model, which is very prevalent now on the internet. It's sort of taken over, but there's very little critical reflection on this model so far. We know, for instance, that there's a copyright infringement scandal going on. I heard about that in Germany, about one of the porno tube sites, and that is actually one of the problems with the porno tube. But as you will find out, there are many other problems that we can talk about, as well as we can talk about pleasures and so on as well. So we have with us today 4 famous pornography scholars, and they will all try to, analyze the model with us. And the moderator today is Sharif Mowlabocus from the University of Essex, specialized in digital media. Sharif has written many articles and book chapters on sexuality and pornography, and also on dating sites, and more currently on dating apps. And so he will also give a talk tomorrow in our next event on the geography of sexuality. So we really sincerely hope you will all show up for that event as well. Thank you very much. Welcome, Sharif.
Thank you very much, Katrine, for the introduction. It's my pleasure to moderate this afternoon's panel, and what an esteemed set of panelists that we have today. I just wanted to reflect for a couple of minutes before I pass the mic over on the name of this strand, though, and in particular this particular panel, Tube as Trashure, and think about this term trashure and what it really means. Of course, it means the convergence of trash and treasure, and it's an interesting convergence of two very, very different things. You know, we have the trashy, the disposable, the unworthy, the poor quality. And we have treasure, which of course is the opposite, worthy of note, of collecting, and of keeping. But that convergence, that simplistic convergence, belies further tensions in the convergence of these two terms. And we could think about that tension, or these tensions operating on different levels. So we might think about the class tension, and class will feature in this particular panel. Trash is a pejorative term that targets and dehumanizes the working class, the urban poor, and the underclass, white trash. So we might think, for instance, the relevance of the term trash in this global culture of austerity, where we are supposedly all in this together, and yet at the same time we refer to people who are seen as unproductive souls in this neoliberal economy as trash or trashy. By contrast, we can think of treasure defined by cultural elites. What moves something from being a piece of trash to a piece of treasure? Well, of course, it's about how we describe it. It's about who describes it. It's about how they operate as mediators of taste, and how they, as cultural elites, define these particular items. There's also, of course, a gender tension here. That convergence of treasure and trash is gendered. We might think of trash in relation to trash TV, trashy magazines. These are all gendered forms of discrimination around particular media artifacts, namely a criticism of the feminine. By contrast, treasure is often seen as the domain of men, whether it be adventures of pirates and sailors, or more relevant to this particular panel, the treasure hidden in the secret museum. The secret museum being a collection of pornography housed in the British Museum, but also in other museums, which was for a long time only accessible on the recommendation of learned men, those cultural elites again, but particularly accessible only to men. And finally, there's a platform tension. Trash is perhaps a metaphor for digital culture today, a culture of the disposable, of instant gratification, of virals and memes and kitten pictures and endless lists that my Facebook profile seems to be littered with. Digital ubiquity and infinite reproducibility creates a sense of worthlessness to many people. If I can always find it on Google, then is it really worth something? Tube culture, as we'll be discussing, is perhaps one of the defining illustrations of this, where we find endless stuff, but perhaps need to, or sometimes do, question the value of such stuff. Meanwhile, treasure is distinctly analog and is defined by scarcity. So it's unreproducible, it's coveted and it's collected because of its uniqueness. So treasure is defined by its exchange value, by its scarcity. And so we have this tension between the analog and the digital, which inevitably leads into a discussion of the politics of art and the digital and the archive, but I've not got time for this and I need to wrap up. So to porn, I mentioned the secret museum. Pornography was something that was once considered hidden away, and clearly today it isn't. It was once considered scarce, but today it's everywhere, it seems. It was once treasured. Now, of course, it may well still be treasured, but I think it's treasured in different ways. We can think of the value of porn, the value of that trashy stuff, as opposed to highbrow erotica, as expanding, as our value systems shift and change as a result of this digital intervention. So what we'll do on this panel is to explore the ubiquity of porn in the digital age and its relationship to those themes of trash and the everyday and of treasure, and thinking about questions such as how we value pornography, what the economies of pornography are and how they've emerged, and how porn acts as both an illustration of the afterglow of digital culture, but also a metaphor for the political tensions between the valued and the devalued within our digital immersive culture. So it's my pleasure to hand over first of all to Susanna, and then to Feona, and then to Slavina, who will each take about 20 minutes to explore some of the themes within this panel before we open up the floor to questions. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Susanna Paasonen, and I'll be the first one to go. And my talk is, will be kind of a bit more general. So I'll be talking about the emergence of porn tubes and what that basically has meant in terms of the distribution and consumption of online porn. So I'll be a bit more general, and then the other presenters will be more particular in their focus. It's often said that, and it's true actually, that the needs of the porn industry have been kind of a driving force behind the development of all kinds of web technologies. Streaming video in the 90s, hosting services, for example, safe credit card payment systems were created largely, although not entirely, solely, for the needs of the porn industry, because basically in the 90s there were not so many forms of content online that people were willing to pay for. But with the case of tube sites, it's not porn that started it, it was YouTube, 2005. And most of the large porn tube sites were established after 2006. Basically copying and emulating the basic model of YouTube. Hosting videos that users can upload, and basically if there are copyright infringements, then they take the videos down. But once you upload something, you sort of had to click boxes like, yes, no, there's no copyright infringement, yes, everything's legal, so forth. So it's basically the people, the users, who may be, I mean, individual users or companies uploading the stuff, who need to take care of any kind of legal repercussions, basically. Obviously, it doesn't always work like this, but that's the basic model. Before, tube sites have become increasingly a dominant format for structuring so-called content, porn content online. When I was wrapping up my book on online porn 2010, it wasn't so dominant yet, but it is increasingly so. And basically what tube sites have meant is the centralization of porn distribution. The differences to 90s web are obvious, but they're also obvious in terms of the early 2000s scene. So in the 90s, basically, searching for porn meant a lot of clicking, using linked lists that would promise to deliver you some kind of content. You would click, and you would click, and you would click, and eventually you might end up on something that you were looking for, or then not. But I think it's the rhythm of kind of perpetual search for something else, for novelty, and the wait for something to happen that pretty much characterized the porn landscape of the 90s. Also, acknowledging that online connections, telephone modem connections, were not exactly speedy, and download speeds in particular could be very slow with the images slowly appearing. Tubes have been made possible with the increased ubiquity of fast internet connections, with the decreased expense of hosting services, of server expenses. And basically, video takes up a lot of bandwidth, and high definition video in particular. So the whole shift towards video being the primary mode of attracting users to a site, as opposed to still images, which were the case of the 90s, is sort of obvious. The porn industry has been considered sort of recession-proof. .com crash, for example, didn't really affect the porn industry too much. What happened with the music industry earlier, with illegal file sharing, didn't touch porn in a similar way. So although evaluations vary in terms of the volume and profitability of the porn industry, most people would agree that profits were increasing all the way up to around 2005, and then they've been coming down. And there are many sort of transformations that have been occurring. DVD sales obviously are going down, which means that traditional large studios like Private in Europe or Vivid on the West Coast, they don't really make money the same way as they used to. What seems to be happening is that profits are moving from porn production to porn distribution. And since porn distribution is increasingly centralized on web platforms, that means that that's the way that money is flowing. At the same time, most porn consumers online don't pay for the stuff they use. That's never been the case. It's 1% or 2% who've ever paid for the porn they use for premium services or something such. Webcam sites might be the sole exception at the moment of the kind of content, personal connection that people are willing to pay for. So tubes have probably played some kind of part in the decreased profitability of the porn industry. At the same time, statistics are really not that easy to come by, so it's more about educated guessing than about really knowing what's going on. But this transformation also overlaps with the increased popularity and accessibility with amateur porn. People uploading their own stuff, ubiquity of mobile phones with cameras. The whole technological landscape has changed in 10 years and a bit more drastically. Tube sites basically cater for all kinds of content. So the promise of having not just, let's say, 20 videos as you might have had in like 98, but thousands and thousands and thousands of videos in all kinds of categories, rendered searchable through tagging, through metadata in general. You can search for the most recent videos, for the most popular ones in your area in general, the ones with the best user ratings. You can browse through categories, such as these. You can browse through tags, or then just do your own searches, linking to further content. So the idea of the tube sites basically is to sort of offer everything in the same, within the same interface rather than linking out from the site. At the same time, porn companies use tubes to promote their products, for example, by uploading teasers or shorter clips of their products, often ending up with, or starting and ending with a sign saying, if you like this, then you might want to click here for more, with the idea that if this is something that the consumer wants, they might eventually pay for it, although not many, of course, will. But it's also users uploading their own treasures, digitized from VHS, their own homemade tapes. So the kind of forms of content are very heterogeneous, and this is a clear departure from the kinds of models of porn portals of the early 2000s. Pornhub, for example, started out as a porn portal. It still partly is, but it's also the driving force behind many of the tube sites. Porn.com, similarly, is still a large sort of porn portal with the idea that there's some free content. For more content you had to pay. And the promise that there's everything you can imagine is to be found from this one supermarket of a site. You don't need to link out, everything is sort of here. And what's been common to these kind of portals is basically offering fresh content on a daily basis, but also trying to attract the attention of the browser, of the people clicking through, by offering something that they haven't seen before, something they haven't maybe thought of or imagined before, which has meant that all kinds of categories, niches and fringes within the pornographic have become increasingly recognizable. I mean, for example, she-male porn, which was rather a niche speciality on video or in print magazines, DVDs of the 90s, has become mainstreamed as something you might expect to find on most porn sites. The same goes for all kinds of sexual cultures. So in a way, the mainstream, so-called mainstream, YouPorn would be extremely mainstream, Tube 8 would be extremely mainstream, they incorporate all kinds of niches and fringes into their framework, which also means that the boundaries of the mainstream are far from easy to map out. My own research has been exactly on how the mainstream of porn has been changing, and after studying so-called mainstream of porn for more than a dozen years, I really don't know what it is. I really don't have much of a clue. All I know is it's not what it was when I started out, but that's not too interesting. So YouPorn, Tube 8, RedTube, they are all affiliates of Pornhub. Pornhub is one of the few porn sites that openly publishes their data. They do all kinds of packages of their data that journalists really like, and so they get a lot of publicity. According to their 2013 statistics, they had something like 17 billion visits within the year, which is an impressive amount. And I think it witnesses to the centralization of porn distribution beyond anything else. So the landscape of online porn, when the web was a new thing, so around 95, was basically people making successful sites like Danny Ash with Danny.com. She decided to post her pictures that were popular on Usenet on the web, learned how to do HTML, set up her site, became hugely popular, and then sold the site for millions 10 years later, approximately. So the early years of porn on the web were basically kind of small entrepreneurs, and the larger, well-established companies like, let's say, Hustler, moved online slightly later, in the latter part of the 90s. So it's been a heterogeneous landscape where sort of these cottage industry sites actually have had a chance for success. But it seems that the landscape is slightly moving and shifting with the format of the tube sites. And it's also, not yet, but it also seems to me that the profits of the porn industry, as it has been traditionally understood, the whole notion of the porn industry is kind of very difficult and vague when it comes to online stuff, I find. For hosting services, obviously, are making lots of money with porn, and they don't really produce it. They don't even upload anything most of the time. So companies like Hustler are making profits increasingly by selling lifestyle products, T-shirts, coffee mugs, stuff like that, rather than print magazines or DVDs. and the money seems to be generated in different ways. Hotels in the US in particular charging for online connectivity because people don't want to pay for their premium TV services anymore. Since people would watch free porn online, they charge everybody for the net connections. So one of the reasons that it's been difficult to estimate the volume of the porn industry is because it is so networked, from credit card companies to sort of entertainment systems within hotels, to sort of lifestyle products. And it's become increasingly, I think, diffuse with the online stuff. At the same time, the tube model is becoming the default format for structuring content online. So 5 years ago, if I was looking for hairy hippie porn, I would probably end up on a site like Hippie Goddess or Sexy Tofu Eaters or something of that kind for what I was looking for. Whereas today, if I use Google to find it and not my bookmarks, this is what I'll find. It's a tube site that then provides more and more content within the same site without a need of clicking out, which means that these kind of solo entrepreneurs sharing their videos on their own site they don't have the same visibility unless you really know what you're looking for, unless you're really specialized and spend a fair amount of time doing your homework, as many of us do, but not everybody. So tube, on most niches, fringes, areas of interest, it's the tube that has become the premium format. Even for sites that offer cater still images plus video, it is the format of the tube that is happening. As you can see, in terms of revenues, it's the targeting, the localized target, the advertising. You can see all the time. It's in Finnish because the screen grabs have been taken in Finland. They're mainly about how my wife and my girlfriend hate this site, and here's a cougar ready for picking if I just browse. So, like YouTube, tube sites make their profits by selling advertising space, and if a site attracts 17 billion users, then that advertising space would be fairly valuable, I would imagine. But sites like X-Hamster, it's not the sole example, but it's one of the well-known. It's an archive. It's a tube site, but it also has an archival sort of dimension. All tubes have. I mean, YouTube has been extensively discussed in media studies as an archive with a heterogeneous set of curators. Basically, all users who upload stuff become curators. This is not an archive in the traditional sense. Most definitions of an archive would sort of start from the departure that in order to archive, you need to discard. You need to curate. You have to select. You can't archive everything. An archive needs to have some principle of organizing the data, selecting, organizing, preserving the data. Tubes don't operate that way. If they are archives, they are extremely heterogeneous. So the borderline between what is considered a treasure, let's say an important history in the development of the ethics of porn cinema, has the same space as so-called crappy home video, meaning poor in technology and not maybe that interesting to many consumers. But these treasures that might also be trash, depending on who you ask, also include vintage porn. So online platforms such as these have become places for distributing novel content, amateur content, but also treasures from VHS, from Super 8. In the incidents of one particular video I've been showing a fair amount, it's a film my father bought the Super 8 film from Frankfurt Airport around '77, and it's been one of the family treasures. Je später der Abend is called the film. So it's a Super 8 film, originally silent. I have the film, physical film, but the projector hasn't really worked and I haven't fixed it, so I can't watch it. So I've been watching it online as a digitized video version, dubbed poorly, and my really bad knowledge of German through 80s detective shows, helps me with the plot. And now it's rendered available as a digital file to be shared as kind of a treasure or trasher, how we want to say it. So the increased visibility of personal archives has also meant the possibility of exploring porn history in different ways. The histories of Super 8 porn films have been very difficult to access, even with DVD, unless you really want to pay for it. Having an understanding what the landscape of stag films was, it's not that easy, whereas tubes have actually facilitated these kind of avenues into porn history, which falls outside film history proper, it falls outside of media history proper, and it involves many, I mean, actually quite severe knowledge gaps in terms of what has been produced and consumed and distributed. We don't know much about European porn histories, for example. But since it's an archive with heterogeneous sets of curators with their own interests and no unifying principle of operation, really, in terms of how content is uploaded, it means that it's a fractured, accidental, random kind of historiography, which I think for me also makes it interesting. But that's it for me.
Hello. I'm going to talk about a particular kind of porn, chav porn, which you can find on tubes, as you can, as Susanna's explained, most kinds of porn now. And I think that one of the things that's interesting about chav porn is that it's a kind of porn that marks itself as being particularly trashy rather than a kind of treasure. It's a new... Sorry. It's a new kind of porn, and yet it's one that is part of a kind of longer history of British pornography and British sex media. So the figure of the chav is a kind of working class or underclass person, somebody who's despised, somebody who is without class, somebody who is a kind of low-life person. And you often will find kind of, where you find chav porn online, it's drunk chavs in council estates, chavs in kind of fairly dirty urban environments. But it comes from this kind of larger tradition of representing sex in pornography, but also in kind of sex comedies and other sorts of sex films. In which sex is often presented as something that's funny, that's saucy, that's rude. So it has this particular kind of set of characteristics associated with it. And you can trace that back further. These are seaside postcards, British seaside postcards, saucy postcards. And this is a kind of fairly typical thing. Bodies are often kind of oversized or they're very puny. People are very overpowering or they're very timid and henpecked. There's a lot of playing around with that idea of men, for example, being kind of little and timid and women being really big and over the top. And in the same way, you have sex being presented either as kind of people are permanently in a state of arousal, wanting to have sex all the time, or on the other hand, they can't get it up, they can't be aroused, they're impotent. So it's a kind of, in lots of ways, it's a kind of gentle sort of set of representations, but it's representing sex as kind of at the extreme. Everything's too big or too little or too much or too, whatever. It's an aspect of British history that hasn't been terribly well celebrated, I think, until recently. But this was an exhibition, not on porn in particular, but on British comic art last year. And you can see these characteristics being celebrated as being particularly British. So the idea of, the woman whose bloomers are showing, and those kinds of facial expressions that are kind of, oops, or people spying on each other, or being embarrassed, or those sorts of feelings, and the seaside setting again. So you get this kind of replication of certain kinds of places, not just the UK, but certain bits of Britain. And this book here, which has the same title, Rude Britannia, which is a man kind of going around Britain and investigating how the sex practices of Brits have changed. So, you know, he goes and visits swingers, and he goes and finds doggers, and he goes and finds people having all different kinds of sex around the British Isle. So this kind of revaluation of British sex as kind of odd and funny, but perhaps something that we want to claim rather than repudiate. And you also get those sorts of characteristics being taken up by some contemporary porn producers who play on their Britishness. So this is Bend Over here and Anna Span here, both taking up, I mean, you can see in the kind of the colouring, the use of flags and so on, but also some of the kinds of language that's being used, this idea of Britishness. And with this one, the Anna Span hug a hoodie. A hoodie is a similar kind of figure in Britain as a chav, someone who has their hood up and is a kind of threatening urban figure. The reference here to David Cameron, it's just like Cameron says, these youngsters love nothing more than to show you their affection. Often in large groups, they spend all day getting up to the kind of stuff you can only imagine they do. Again, these kind of they're disaffected groups of British youths up to no good. So one of the things I've become interested in is how that idea of Britishness that is found in lots of different kinds of sex media, but also more broadly across popular culture, is then reworked in some forms of pornography, and then how that feeds into the more recent chav porn. This is a site, top UK sex sites, called Never Mind the Bollocks. And you can see that there's this kind of very self-conscious recycling of British porn as having a particular kind of character. So it says of itself, British porn has a style all of its own, a raw, amateur and hardcore edge that American porn lacks. Who wants to see plastic-looking, over-tanned, fake-titted porn stars getting laid when you can see real teens and amateur sluts get hot and sweaty instead? And there is this kind of reproduction of the idea of the real, that not the plastic, not the mannered, but the authentic, the hot and sweaty, the down-to-earth and the rude. So you have rude Brits, you have British spankers, and there are particular recurring themes. Spanking seems to be something that's recycled as a particularly British thing. Suburban amateurs. So again, you've got then the idea of the amateur, but a particular kind of amateur from the suburbs. And you know, that whole history of your you know, what your neighbours are up to, or the postman or the window cleaner, and people looking through windows, and what are people near us getting up to. And often playing very much on that idea of the wife, the reader's wife, the ordinary woman, the girl next door in a domestic setting. So this is the kind of the real porn, not the performer, not the porn star. A subset of that, and this is more recent as well, is the idea of the dogger as another British invention, or something that's closely associated with Britain as well. The idea of people having sex outside, near cars. Interestingly, kind of that move away from the suburbs and the seaside to kind of little outdoor places where people will watch each other having sex, a kind of exhibitionist sex, but usually characterised as being kind of, I don't know, kind of sort of quite grubby little gatherings. You know, they're sort of hidden away. They're in parks, and they're sort of around the margins, even though they are out in the open. So there's a number then of different characteristics that have been really quite explicitly recycled here to give an idea of a particular sort of British sex. It's associated with it's got its particular characters, so you get lots of schoolgirls, people in nurses' uniforms. There's the idea of seediness. There's the idea of sex being associated with the working class and it being naughty. There's the humorousness, so it's a cheeky thing, it's a comic thing. It's down to earth, it's everyday, it's not spectacular, it's something that happens in very, very ordinary, mundane settings. And it has particular kinds of qualities. It's been described as having a not meant to be seen quality, which is really kind of played up in, you know, in that idea of the window cleaner peering through the window and so on. It's slightly grotty, even though it's funny and in some ways seems rude and kind of down to earth. It's also rude in the sense of dirty. So something that's you see it, but it's a bit kind of squeamishness. It's about coyness. It's about innuendo and wordplay and so on. On the other hand, it is authentic, or it's been presented as authentic, especially in comparison with America. So you get this idea of the opposition again, you know, that, and it's like the trash and the treasure. This is real compared to the artificial and so on. So if we then kind of look at how the imagery of the chav has played into this, the figure of the chav is much more widespread than in pornography. It's a figure that's been associated with as a comic figure. This is from the Little Britain comedy and became kind of one of the most recognisable figures of the chav girl, the kind of the trashy girl with, you know, no values, really stupid, with lots of children, a real kind of low-life character, and then a corresponding sort of debate around what that kind of figure means. So various books and articles being published about this kind of the resurrection of this term as a real attack on working class people. So the figure of the chav's been described as representing the working class as lazy, tasteless, unintelligent, criminal, and the female chav in particular as being excessive, ignorant, playful, unruly, and vulgar, and with a sexual appetite, with no kind of discrimination around sex. There has been a fashion for dressing up as chavs at parties. This is Prince William as a chav. So there's this kind of this sort of odd. On the one hand, it's about celebration and performance and playing, but it has this kind of real nasty edge as well, because it's associated with actual groups of people in very powerless positions in British society, and a great deal of hate and demonisation, as Owen Jones has discussed. And this is one of the things that I think is interesting, that you can see new forms of pornography evolving, but you can then find that they're parts of these broader histories, and that you can look at them one way and they seem quite celebratory, but you look at them another way and they have a kind of more sinister edge. So with the figure of the chav, we've increasingly seen more and more porn being specifically labelled as chav porn, stuff that you can search for. This is dirty chav sluts, and in terms of place, again, you can see that we now move from the suburbs to the council estate. That is where the chav sluts are associated with place-wise. They're drunk, they drink Lambrini, they have no taste, so their consumption practices are also kind of... And they have hoop earrings, too much makeup, etc. And they're dirty. That's the key characteristic of the chav slut. This site, Chavley Court, which has since disappeared, although of course nothing really ever disappears, so you can still find it, but doesn't appear to be a going concern anymore, was around up until the last few months, and it takes on this kind of comic aspect. So Chavley Court is a fictional place where these two characters, Woody Nobbit and Justin Hole, with wonderful British wordplay there, go to find chav sluts to fuck. One of the things that I think is really interesting in that representation of chavs, but you find it kind of in more in other sorts of British pornography as well, is this particular kind of sensibility that is kind of gaudy and comic, but at the same time has this kind of rueful quality, or this disappointed quality. And this is, I think you can see this in some of the posts and some of the things that are on the most recent pages of the top UK sex sites. This one says, it's sod's law that everyone else is having better sex life than you. You just know that the busy house down the street where the light stays on at all hours is a swingers hangout where the sex flows all night and day. Annoying, isn't it, not being able to get involved? It then tells you that you can sign up for a real sex pass for a hot British site, which will showcase the seedy side of British amateur porn. It's all gangbangs and hardcore sex in real suburban homes with real nymphomaniac housewives. Your neighbours might not answer the door when you knock, but at least you can now watch their secrets. So this idea, again, of it being kind of, it's all there for you, but also it's still behind closed doors. It's a secret, and there's something kind of like you can't quite join in. And there's this funny a combination of characteristics that presents sex as something that's kind of wonderful and playful, but also kind of a source of disappointment and yearning at the same time. One of the things then that I've started to wonder about, and I think that as porn studies develops and we pay more attention to pornography as both out there on the tubes, but also connected to real places, particular countries, particular regions, and also to other forms of culture, is how we make sense of those things as belonging to both realms at the same time. So, for example, it's possible to link both the older British history of sex media and other kinds of reality programming in Britain to chav porn and to particular concerns with certain places in Britain. I don't know if you're familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with the Beckhams, who are kind of Essex characters. The idea of the posh character who really isn't posh. The vulgar celebrities that are then kind of a more contemporary kind of royalty. Figures like Katie Price or Jordan, a particular kind of glamour that's associated with reality TV, and The Only Way is Essex, which is a structured reality TV show, which has kind of gone past its peak in Britain now, but was very kind of prominent a couple of years back. And so you have this other sort of area to be associated with this particular kind of British sex. And Travelley Court was associated with the Midlands. So there's a sense of being very specifically located in a particular place at the same time as these things become much more widely available. This links, and this, Sharif gave me the idea of this, to another kind of sort of British obsession with how crap Britain is. So this constant sort of wanting to label, you know, which is the crappiest town at the moment, which is the crappiest day out, what is the naffest thing we can do, which seems to have its own particular pleasures. And this, you know, sort of labelling maps of the UK in terms of their crap characteristics, or, you know, so it's certainly not glorious British history. And I think if you then compare the way that certain porn tropes, like the vehicle, is used in different kinds of porn, that kind of national character or the regional character shows up much more. So this is Bang Bus, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the use of the bus to pick up women who you have sex with and then you may throw them out. And that's the British version. That comes from the Travelley Court people, with the chav van, the white van, again, the sign of British crapness. With these chav hunters go out to look for chav sluts and then throw them out of the van. And as I say, Travelley Court is kind of, the site, the franchise or whatever it was, seems to have disappeared, but it's now turned into this, which I thought was interesting in terms of that idea of travelling. It's become UK road trips, where we've got this kind of, we've got the English breakfast, we've got beef eaters, we've got men in busbies, we've got all kinds of London. And again, this idea of being on the road, going around sampling these pleasures. I haven't got anything else but to say, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
So after this great analysis and brilliant speech, I will be reading mine. I think that my contribution here is more related to the practice and politics of net porn. And I'm going to present an experience that wants to overcome in some ways the tube culture, giving another place to the so-called user. And I'm talking about Camphor. Besides making some good and creating more debate on sexual rights, Camphor is about promoting a more self-aware, interesting, stimulating, pluralist and anti-conformist kind of pornography. It aims at becoming the first online platform to promote all non-conventional projects, sharing the vision that another porn is possible, and that even when masturbating, you can do something to make a better world. My name is Slavina, and I am a porn activist. To simplify, I can say that I'm in porn since 2006, when, driven by curiosity, filth, and chronic lack of money, it was a very good business at that time, I joined a very famous American alt porn site. Then I lived a short while season in mainstream porn, working in production for a big company. And then I discovered the Barcelona post-porn scene. And finally, I developed my own way to use pornography as a tool for social change. My English sucks, I'm sorry. And I'm very moved. Sex is the top word searched on the internet. With nearly billions of yearly revenues, the sex industry is one of the greatest markets online. Unfortunately, it is also one of the less ethical and transparent ones. The current model of consuming online sexual contents has many negative implications. Today, sexual rights are still threatened in many parts of the world, with gender inequalities, sexual stereotypes, prejudice, and stigma depriving people of the possibility of flourishing in such a fundamental dimension of their life experience. The prevailing model is finalized to business, and through it systematically aims at subjugating our sexual imagination to marketing standards. As a result, instead of reflecting the natural plurality of human sexuality, much of today's online sexual contents foster to a one-dimensional perspective, which is often fake, violent, and macho-centered. So we are not only talking about malware, spam, redirecting, JavaScript catchers, traffic broking, and strict controlled and often disgusting advertisement. Today, the porn industry has an unchallenged power to decide which content should be available online, even when it's tagged as amateur. Often, you are seeing an industry product. So, we decided to open a new space for sexual imaginary, promoting a new sexual revolution, one that at its core, people instead of money, respect for diversity instead of uniformity, and solidarity instead of selfishness. Our goal is to devolve at least 1% of the total revenue of the online sex industry to support ethical causes aimed at defending and promoting sexual rights. Provided no one is harmed and that everything is legal, is there any reason why these revenues cannot be used for better ends? The reality of our days is that even if there is a big interest in cultural functions of porn, with debates and studies, these terms comes already loaded with a value-laden, mostly negative connotation. We want to be recognized the distinction between exploitation and pornography. We are used to live in a system based in exploitation. These are the ruins of the collapsed Bangladesh garment factory in Savar. So I'm gonna ask you, just to make an example, do you wear clean clothes? Capitalism is based on exploitation, but for bigotry we recognize it only in porn industry. Maybe this is one of the reasons, because the first funding campaign of CAM4 that involved some enterprises that in a kind or outraged way negate their support to the project, and then it failed. So we decided to start a crowdfunding campaign.
My name is Vicky. And my name is Marco. And we'd like to share with you our project for a website called CAM4.org. CAM4 is a website with a simple but revolutionary goal: to link online pornography with causes. We are aware that around the world, many people suffer because they lack the resources necessary for food, water, medicine, and housing. At the same time, we have noted the exponential growth of online pornography and the fact that here in this market generates about $100 billion. Hence, we devised CAM4, our way to rethink pornography with ethics and to launch a new sexual revolution in the internet era. We want to build a charity-focused, user-generated porn site, and it goes like this. After registering, people can create their own personal profile, follow other users, create or join other groups, and chat with other people. They can upload, share, and watch sexually explicit content for free. So far, technically CAM4 is no different from other websites with a similar offer. However, what distinguishes our project is that users must link every video or performances they upload with a certain code from those available on the website. Besides amateur user, professionals like producer and pornstar can use CAM4 to advertise their commercial products in three ways. First, they can upload their sponsored videos that, like any others, are also associated with causes. Second, professional can buy advertising spaces at the end of other free videos. Each time a sponsored video is played, it generates revenue. Third, pros can buy also classic advertising. CAM4 will transfer all the money automatically. We are neither prophets, nor Davids, nor big entrepreneurs. But we think the time has come to rethink critically the relationship between internet and sexuality. It's in back, both, form, and scope. Our promise is that all CAM4 cash flow will always be absolutely transparent. The interface will be smooth and friendly, and users' privacy and data will never be exploited. Spam and aggressive advertising is never used, and any inappropriate content that violates our guidelines will be easily removed. We have a huge team to develop our vision and create an unforgettable rewards. We just need your help. Let's start together a new sexual revolution.
And we succeed. We reached and overtake the goal. Many people supported us, and there was a big interest from the media from all over the world. For us, that was the recognition that there is a big need of this kind of new pornography and ethic in porn and net porn. The bigger challenge that we are facing is the one that wants to change the stereotypical porn user into an active contributor that can finance charitable or ethically inspired causes that can upload, watch, share, and rate self-made erotic porn and sexual content that can interact with similar. Our aim is to promote the self-production of porn material, adding another meaning to the word contributor. But we realized that this will be a next step in the development of the website. The actual CAM4 editorial proposal is directed at carefully selecting the best quality of contents and the most revolutionary authors, producers, and performers from the landscape of contemporary alternative pornography. And we will start the activity of the web simply promoting every week some porn contents of good quality and different flavors. We still need to destroy completely the brand of infamy that still marks pornography with a red letter. Surprisingly or not, it has not been easy to find a foundation that accepts our proposal to be financed by porn. But at the end, we succeed another time.
In my life, I've been in love once. She didn't know. I'm sure she never even noticed me. Now these days are gone. I never stay long with the same girl. I pay for it. And I enjoy that. I know it's illegal, but I don't care, and nor does my dad. He enjoys coming with me, choosing that right one. I loved my first time so much, I decided to come back with my friends. Then, we're in. I don't care. My name is Attwood. I've been in a wheelchair all my life. If you don't like me, or my fantasies, or you don't think I have the right, you can kiss my ass.
So maybe not surprisingly, the first foundation that we will finance is the Asta Philpott Foundation, that organizes travels for disabled people with the purpose to facilitate them in discovering the joys of sex. And it's not a simple coincidence that the community of people with different abilities is now the focus of the attention of the research of the more radical side of the post-porn scene. What we consider the most important goal to reach, to let the website work, is the building of a community, a free space where the contributors can not only downloading good porn material, video, but also audio and text and multimedia, interact and feel free to become one day their own porn star. CAM4 is still a work in progress. Probably we will start the trade on next week. And I invite you all to join our Trashure future community.
My thanks to three fantastic papers, fantastic presentations from Susanna, thinking about the technological as well as the economic development of tube cultures, and throwing up some very interesting questions there around kind of the structure and the nature of the porn that we consume and how we archive it. And then Feona thinking a thoroughly British affair being, you know, crap sex, as it were, and thinking through sort of some of those issues around the relationship between treasures, national treasures I was thinking of, you know, in particular, and trash and the reappropriation through representation. And then finally, Slavina with the Come For project, and thinking about how this kind of idea of trash, if we were to think of pornography as trash, can be used to talk back. So a grassroots movement from within which others might reconceptualize and think about ethical porn and other connections and networks within ethical lives. So I'm keen to open up the floor to questions, as we have a large audience here today, and let's face it, everyone likes talking about sex or having sex and watching porn. So perhaps I can... Do we have a roving mic? We do. So we have a roving mic. If you could put your hands up if you'd like to be the first brave person to ask a question. Otherwise, I'm here with a mic, and that's a very dangerous position for me to be in, because I will continue talking. Are there any questions from the audience or comments? Thank you. There's one over here. We have them. If you can just wait until the mic comes over to you, just for the streaming purposes. Thank you.
So I really want to thank you all for the wonderful, fresh presentation. And I'll try to connect all the three interventions with the theme of realness. And in relationship to the first presentation about the porn tubes, I think that it's even interesting to understand how do these networks work in terms of marketing. So how do they develop themselves? And I think that this is really deal with like the infrastructure, internet infrastructure revolution of Web 2.0, and it's related to the user-generated content, basically. So the thing is that when the digital divide was like suppressed in the beginning of the 19th, that gave the possibility of different porn to be developed, and specifically speaking, a DIY pornography and a feminist pornography, as Slavina used to say. But when like the HTML went over and this idea of content, user-generated content came in, this became a real marketing from porn agencies, let's say. And I think that they used that to develop their platforms, or their YouTube platforms. So the idea is, if you navigate our networks, you will find real pornography, because it's pornography that is uploaded by the people who does that. So we are not representing the stereotype and like the structures of the corporative mainstream porn, but it is corporative mainstream porn anyway. So what happens, for example, let's make an example of Xtube, which is a network that I navigate. Xtube have a typical social media structure profile with like the profile and the video that you can upload and blah, blah, blah. But what happens is that when you go there, even if you go to a niche, so a specific niche, like for example, bears, you go there and then like the 3 first or even 4 first pages, it's the production of Xtube itself. So in a way, Xtube says, come over, it's I am your mirror, you know, you are uploading the content, so it's real, but then it's not. And the problem for me, taking a political perspective there, is that when you go on like the first main page, it's basically heteronormative porn. So in a way, this connected to Slavina, then from one side, the communication is you'll find real porn, and then you find like Xtube produced porn, which is heteronormative, first. Then in relationship to the presentation about Chev, that was very funny, I really liked it, but I think, but maybe it's the problem of a geopolitical contextualization. The Chev phenomenon in England is basically white. But for my experience, for example, surfing the net porn scenario, especially in the gay field, is that there is a very strong racialization. So most of the proletarian representation of sexuality are based on what I'm saying something bad. The West culture miss as masculine performance, which is racialized. So it's basically, for example, Arab. So in gay porn videos online, when, let's say, a proletarian representation is enacted in a porn activity, it's basically Arabs. Or, let's say, Northern Africans, you know? And this is in a lot of gay porn productions. So do you think that it's maybe would be important to take a direction of an analysis based on the orientalization processes in masculine identity through the chav phenomenon? That's the two questions.
Thank you. Could I ask for responses from the panelists?
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. With most of the porn, the tube sites, you sort of have to choose if you're looking for straight or gay. If you're looking for, let's say, independently made lesbian porn, most tube sites wouldn't, they wouldn't be the perfect place to start. Now, my guess is that the deal with the kind of top 3 or 4 hits is a sponsored video. So basically, the production studios pay for the tube site to promote their products. So they're not producing them; they're sponsoring them, and that's one way to make money. At the same time, a fair amount of the content is sort of amateur stuff. And of course, amateur porn is attractive from the perspective of the site, because people uploading their own stuff, basically it's free content for the site. And most of the time when they start, if you upload a video, you have to click that everyone's sort of over 18, or in the US slightly older maybe. Everything's sort of, there are no copyright infringements, everybody performing has agreed to perform, la la la. And then you also grant the site the rights to do anything they like on any medium hereby invented, existing or hereby invented. So basically you waive off your rights to the product. So thinking of this kind of labors of love of amateurs, I mean, it might be a particular kind of gift economy for the people uploading the videos. But from the perspective of the site, it's basically free content, which sort of makes up a fair amount of the stuff there is. So it is, in a way, heterogeneous with the corporate porn and with the kind of self-made kitchen sink kind of porn. But it definitely is hierarchical, and it definitely is structured. I mean, there is the obvious division between either gay or straight. You can't have both. You have to go to another site to access particular kinds of material. When you've chosen that orientation, then you get these different categories where certain, again, hits will become the top hits and certain kinds of not. So definitely all kinds of hierarchies do exist.
Just on the question of race and class, I mean, Susanna's written about the way that porn tends to emphasise difference in order to transgress it. So, I mean, it plays with, you know, sort of big versus small, white versus black, and so on. And I think you see, so you do get that element of the way that race is used. I think that the straight chav porn does seem to focus very much on white bodies. And I think the gay chav porn does something slightly different around that. But I do think that class becomes the exciting but disturbing difference that is played on in it, maybe in a similar way that you get raised, you know, the kind of difference of race in other kinds of pornography. Thank you.
I mean, just to add to that, I think you mentioned comedy within your presentation, and I think pornography works in many ways, but in particular, it works in the same way as comedy to reflect the cultural tensions. You know, pornography can be considered, national pornographies, I think very much can be considered a barometer of the particular tensions, whether they be class-based, which at the moment in particular in the UK they very much are, or whether they be racialised, whether they be gendered. So I think it's very much also about sort of specificity, even when we're talking about transnational kind of global porn cultures. Moving on, are there any other questions? We have one at the front here, if we can get the mic over. Thank you.
Yes, because we are talking about porns, I thought the question came in my mind. We are focused on this theme. Who decides what's going up, lauded? Is the porn industry somehow controlled of the states where it's made? Or I know only in Germany there's a freiwillige Selbstkontrolle if you sell porno movies. But who decides which can be shown in the internet, or is there in every country such kind of freiwillige Selbstkontrolle?
So a question about kind of the legalities and copyrights and who decides what we get to see.
Yeah. What I can say, maybe connecting to what Francesco told before, is that I don't know who decide, but for instance, I decided to join Com4 as a project because the kind of porn that me and my friend of the post-porn scene we produce can't pass in YouPorn, Xtube and PornTube and all this kind of stuff. It's too weird and it's outside of many taxonomy and it's not...
Sorry, Slavina, can I just pause there? When you say it can't pass, does it mean that it can't be put onto the site or that it wouldn't be discovered? Because I think that's really important.
It's undiscoverable when it passes, because sometimes it's directly censored.
The question is, how is it censored? Sorry.
How is?
How is it censored?
Like you upload it and you don't see it. In this way, very, very easy.
So in terms of national regulations, well, the thing with online distribution is that if some kind of content is illegal in one country, then a server can always be somewhere else. I mean, that's happened, for example, with Finland, where I come from, with sort of sex dating ads, because there's always like organized business is something that can't exist. So when there's been controversy around that, the server has just been moved to Netherlands, and that has sorted the problem. But then in some countries, of course, there's more organized sort of filtering going on. Or, well, Feona can say a few words about the UK case.
The situation in the UK at the moment is, I mean, there has been an introduction of filtering, which, as these things often work, has managed to filter out people's access to sex education sites, LGBT sites, and all sorts of other sites, including the site of the MP who introduced the filtering in the first place, although she strongly denied it. But that, and I mean, and academic sites, the things that I can't access my own website through my phone anymore because my phone provider picks up that it mentions sex. I mean, it's done in a very blunt way. So I mean, there's a lot of debate around that at the moment. The other thing that is kind of not so recent but is ongoing is the introduction of the extreme porn legislation a number of years ago, and that's it made illegal various kinds of pornography. By defining things in quite a sort of vague way around injury, things that might be injury, but in such a way that BDSM representations could be included in that, and all kinds of various sorts of role play, so where people play dead and that kind of thing. People started getting prosecuted for having material that was, that was showing acts that were actually legal to perform but had suddenly become illegal to represent, and were being prosecuted for a very wide range of materials. So some of the cases in the last couple of years have one focused on a video that became known as the Spankwire video, and it was the subject of a prosecution that this guy had this video on his computer. But at the same time, thousands and thousands of teenagers had been posting their own reaction videos to that same video on YouTube. So you've got this really kind of contradictory position where there are, the law is going after people, and yet these things are kind of in plain sight as well. I mean, it's a real mess. But I think that the impact of that has been that it does kind of encourage a system where people just worry about what they, you know, am I accessing something illegal now? Or, as Sharif has written about, or that, what if this thing that I'm looking at now, perhaps even as a researcher, was to become illegal, you know, before I finish my PhD or before I publish this, then I've kind of broken the law in retrospect and all of that kind of thing. So there's I think that the regulation works in different ways. Sometimes it kind of outright stops people getting access to things, but also there's a kind of creation of a culture of fear where the burden of guilt is certainly, it's on the consumer or the potential consumer rather than the producer, and people kind of live in fear of, you know, whether they're breaking the law at any given time. And because the things are so vaguely worded, it's very difficult to know whether you're doing that or not.
Thank you.
I was really interested in this thing about the various levels of fakeness and realness, as you were saying, because there are so many levels involved. So maybe there are a lot of fake porns, so fake agent, fake something. Okay, so it's a really interesting thing, and maybe you know that the fake agent idea was born on 4chan, and it was imported. So it became it went from hacking, pirating to corporate, and then goes back into the public, and then people think, okay, this is how you do sex. So it goes on and on through fake and reality, and goes back to fakeness and imagined reality, because oh, this is how you do sex, you do this and that. And so I'm really interested in that, in this moving back and forth through fake and real, and to fake back again, and to the education also, no? Because also this thing that people learn more and more. Okay, so this is how you do sex, but it's not. But it could be, but it becomes the way you do sex. So it's really interesting, and I really wanted to know what you think about it.
On the whole play between the fake and the real, I think that's at the heart of a lot of porn. Think of the rise of gonzo porn in the 90s, where basically the people producing the porn are also performing in it. Often laid claims to the realness, like here am I in my garden, and here's the woman next door, and now we're having sex, and like it's spontaneous, and look, what she realizes, I have a camera, but she doesn't realize that it's going to be a video that will be sold all over the world. So this kind of like fake reel that then became mainstreamed online by companies such as Reality Kings. I mean, they have a number of similar concepts, and they are all similarly fake. And it's always like, if you see the one video you see next, like, accidentally we happen to be in this motel room, it's always the same bed, the same lamppost. And then you see the same pro-am performers, the same like regular woman from the street performing in all kinds of reality videos. So this whole kind of pro-am economy, reality, semi-gonzo porn, I mean, that's been going on for a long time. And I think one of the attractions of amateur stuff is that it sort of promises to do something else than this kind of fake realness. But then again, amateur has been a subcategory of commercial porn production since the 80s, at least. So they are sort of, let's say, deeply entwined. In terms of porn education, I would just say that the difficulty with porn is that it sort of tries to show the viewer how porn feels, but it only operates through audiovisual means, sight and sound. So a lot of the sensory is amputated by default. It can only sort of show how things look. And since things are optimized for visibility, for the camera, for the microphone, for the lights, what people perform and how they perform the act, it's not optimized for pleasure often. It's more optimized for kind of a, let's say, visual effect. So for somebody with little experience over what bodies can do and what they might want to do with their bodies, it's not necessarily excellent educational material. And then there's also the case that there's the pushing the envelope in terms of what bodies might do. in commercial porn production, especially since productions moved to Hungary and the Czech Republic in the early 90s. More spectacular acts began to surface with not just sort of double penetrations, but much more. So there's also this kind of play around the malleability and flexibility of the human body that's, well, it's rather distant to what many people choose to perform in the privacy of their, of their intimate relationships. So as education material, it's maybe not always so great.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more quick question, if there is one. Yes, we have down in the front here.
Yeah, it's a question about failure, actually. I think a lot of the phenomenon, the CHA phenomenon, for instance, focuses on low lives and people who have failed. But actually, it's also saying that the low life actually has a superior sex life, right? So it's still always about a sexual good performance, so to speak. I mean, that is really pretty much central in pornography, that we are looking at successful sex performances. And then I just wanted to ask you, Slavina, about when you start thinking about disabilities and sex, I think that's really when things starting to shift. Yeah, so like, can you still make pornography around sex that doesn't work, sex that's full of incompetence, failure, and so on? So I just wonder how that, is that an opening up of the genre of pornography, or is that never going to work? Do we always have to succeed?
I think that it's an occasion to show other sides. And like every diversity, the aim of post-porn has always been the show diversity of sex and come out from the genital obsession, for instance, no? And say that sex is for all body and not concentrated in some area that if they works, you're okay, or if not.
I just wonder if you think people are going to get hooked on as voyeurs. You think we will get hooked on that? What is your vision?
I don't know, but what I felt in discovering, for instance, post-porn porn, is that my imaginary had to be reset in some way. And so, for instance, one of the first movie that I saw was from Barbara de Genevieve. And for me, at the first time, what was only shocking. I don't get like excited by this, aroused at all. But then, the more time I saw it, then I get used to that kind of corporeity, to that kind of intercourses. I discovered other side of my sexuality. Of course, that the doggy style with the blondie with big tits and guy with the very big dick aroused me, and maybe still aroused me. But what I'm trying to do with myself and with my work and with the other people is like to open other areas and possibility of the excitement, the arousement, and the sexual practices, not only in the representation, but in life also.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're at time and a great opportunity to stop. Can I just thank our panelists, Feona and Susanna and Slavina, once again for fantastic presentations. Thank you.